Thank you very much. I would like to introduce Dr. Lisa Brown, who is our Ursuline College Presenting Fellow this semester. And she is here for the first part of our class to talk about spiral dynamic theory. That feeds into a lot of the reading that we're doing, thinking about cultural memory, identity, and inclusion this month. So, please, Dr. Brown, thank you very much. Please take it away.
Well, I want to first begin by thanking Dr. Stiff for allowing me to be here today. And as I mentioned, this is like my favorite preparation so far in terms of all of the series I've been doing. I've been working in the areas of nursing, counseling and art therapy, and of course, education. Just a little bit about me. I graduated from the University of Georgia in 2016. And I have my PhD in adult education learning and organization development. And my dissertation covered civic engagement among those adults who attended traditional public and the emerging private for-profit universities. And I did all of that research in Chile, South America. So I was a visiting scholar at the Universidad Católica de Mali in Talca, and was there for like 2.5 years in an immersion experience. And I now consider Chile my second country, and I plan to go back as soon as I get an opportunity. So I'm going to pass out these wonderful guides for you to reference as we go through the presentation on spiral dynamics. And then I believed in you too. I believe in engaged learning, so I don't want to just sit here and be very didactic and just spill all this information. I really want you to be involved in the learning, because that's one of the foundational approaches to adult learning. We believe that learning happens in a very collaborative way, and the adults bring unique life experiences that help contribute to a richer understanding of knowledge. So, did you all get a chance to read the article? You can say yes if you didn't. Were there any questions from it at this point? Okay, because I'm going to be going through a lot of that content when we get to the spiral dynamics session. So I entitled this presentation, Understanding and Preserving Our Historical Past, Present, and Future, Guided by Spiral Dynamic Theory. And my agenda is to have a part one, where we'll talk about some basic terms and definitions that undergird spiral dynamic theory. And then I want to discuss how race and history meet at the crossroads of what I call mimetic crossroads. Then I'm going to talk and share with you some video clips that are representative of these various constructs of worldview that make up the spiral dynamic theory framework. Then the last part of our activities is going to involve the exercise, where I prepare these vignettes, and we are going to critically analyze these vignettes and try to identify among the actors what particular spiral dynamic worldview is in operation with them. So lots of fun. So I started off, first of all, puzzled about what it meant to have cultural memory. So in my investigation, I came up with this description. Cultural memories are those transformative historical experiences that define a culture. Even as time passes, it adapts to new influences. And that part got me really, really excited, because mimetics is about adaptation. So let's get a little philosophical first, right? Yes.
I'm sorry. Will we have, is this something that we can, like, you'll post on?
The podcast, yes, I'll make that available. So,
that was really
thank you. Okay. So let's start off with some definitions. So remember I talked about engaged learning. So what is a paradigm? Does anybody have an idea?
Kind of like an assumed reaction or but something that you assume is what it is.
Okay, that's cool, because you know one of the things that frustrated me in graduate school, that they threw these big words out at us and I never knew what they were, and no one took the time to break it down. So I promised when I would become a professor that I would make sure students understood these foundational concepts. So a paradigm is a worldview or perspective that includes one's axiology, which are our values. It includes our ontology, which is the nature of reality. And then it also includes an epistemology, which is the methods, validation, and scope that determines knowledge and separates it from opinion. And then I want to go a little bit deeper in ontology because that's what spiral dynamic theory deals with. So an ontology, which is the nature of reality, is part of a worldview and has been described in the academic literature as having depth in 3 domains. You have this empirical reality, you have this actual reality, and you have what's called the real reality according to Ayres. And the former two, these empirical and actual, help inform the real reality. And I had that reading there if you want to actually read the article. So my next question for my engaged classroom. What are prejudice, discrimination, and racism, and how might they impact our cultural memory? So anybody have a definition for what's prejudice? What is prejudice?
Sort of a predetermined, or like an attitude that you already have, like, where you put certain, like, kind of for or against, or you value something and disvalue other things.
I like that.
And it, and sometimes you don't really even realize it's kind of something that you grew with, and you don't realize it's there necessarily.
Okay, cool. I like that. What's discrimination?
Like an act, so it's like actively oppressing.
Okay. And then what's racism?
Applying the first two to
Yeah.
certain groups of people.
See, this is why I love working with graduate students. They're so analytical. So I found this meme that I thought did an excellent job. One of the best I saw. It's a shame that my understanding just came through a meme I got off of Facebook. But it works, so I included my teaching. So, feelings of dislike for a racial or ethnic group plus belief in that dislike is a prejudice. And this is a cumulative process. Following that, it is actions that harm those you have prejudice against, which results in discrimination. Those combine to institutionalization of this discrimination, which is perpetuated in society. When discrimination becomes a part of how the society does things, that's racism. And so racism is a structural imposition of prejudice and discrimination, okay? So I thought that was a very fair and easy to work with description, because I really think that we can even get deeper in terms of racism. But for our purposes, that's what we're going with. And I also wanted to note we all have to negotiate within what I call mimetic paradigms of superiority that help undergird racism. So let me talk about mimetics. So mimetics is a theory and form of academic study holding that mental units of culture, called memes, operate and transfer through non-genetic imitation. So examples of memes can include images, beliefs, songs, policies, etc. Now, memes mirror the biological gene construct, and that's why they have similar sound, meme gene. And so in that sense, it mirrors genes because it also has the procreative process of replication, variation, and natural selection in order to remain relevant. So the meme operates the same way in order to perpetuate itself as a biological gene does, but it does so in a non-genetic way. Now I'll explain that further as we go on. The last thing I want to distinguish about memes is a meme differs from a symbol. Because I see a lot of stuff on the internet that people think are memes, but they're not. Memes differ from symbols and symbolism because of its evolutionary property. So, again, the meme goes through this process of replication, a little bit of change in it in order to make it relevant to the new context it finds itself in. So in biology, you have a gene that make a mutation in order to remain relevant in the environment. Make sense? Okay. So let me give you a little bit more descriptive testimony from Richard Dawkins. And so Richard Dawkins coined the word meme. He is a zoologist. I disagree with some of his approaches about it, but I think he does a very good job in giving a rudimentary explanation for what the meme is. So I'm going to share that with you.
it looks like an epidemic, it behaves like a virus. That is memes. That's the spread of memes. My first book, The Selfish Gene, published in 1976, was all about the gene as the unit of selection. The gene, the universal replicator DNA. I wanted to make the point that although DNA was the unit of selection in life, any unit of selection would do if it were a replicator that faithfully copied itself. So I wanted another example. I could have used a computer virus, but I think they hadn't been invented then. So I used the meme instead, the unit of cultural inheritance. Anything that's copied, in this case from brain to brain. It could be something like a tune that you whistle, and somebody else picks up the tune and whistles it again, and then it spreads like an epidemic. Blue tits, the birds in Britain that learned how to open milk bottles. Milk bottles in Britain used to be put on the doorstep every morning, and one rather clever bird learned how to open the milk bottle, and then it spread as an epidemic because others imitated it. That's a meme. The reverse baseball cap is a meme. Anything that's imitated, anything that spreads by imitation. We talk about things on the internet going viral. That is memes. That's the spread of memes. To the extent that some memes spread better than others, that's a kind of natural selection. So I wasn't really attempting to make a contribution to the study of human culture. I was rather attempting to downplay the gene as the only unit of natural selection.
So I think he does a reasonable job of explaining how a meme transfers, and especially in the case of virally and internet memes. So here is an image meme that I used as an example, and memes on the internet can travel very, very quickly. Now there was a controversy with Dove soap. Are you guys familiar with that? Where Dove soap had this image of a black woman removing her shirt to reveal a white woman, and that did not sit well with a lot of people.
When did they do that?
Oh, it was a while back. Last semester at least. So what distinguishes the meme in my scholarship that's a little bit different from Dawkins is the way that the meme makes evolutionary permutations, or people change it in order to make it relevant to a particular context. So you had this meme, and people started to have a little bit of fun with it on the internet. So this guy made this meme that said when the cops show up to the party, and so he takes his shirt off and reveals a white guy. And then somebody had fun and did a little Michael Jackson meme. That is how the meme evolves to remain relevant to a particular social context. But what's important to note is that this meme has a historical association to trauma for some people, because American advertising at one time operated under this narrative that black skin was dirty or unattractive. And so here's an old advertisement for Pear soap. And you see on the advertisement it's encouraging you to use the soap because it will improve your complexion. And in the view of this advertisement, taking the complexion from black to white was an improvement. That's why that meme got such a visceral reaction for some people. And so, everybody understand? Yeah, okay, great. So, have y'all ever seen this before on a job application?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I mean, it has its utility, but it has its problems too, which I'm going to point out now. So, what is race and how is it different from ethnicity? That's my next question. What is race and how does it differ from ethnicity? I know, right? It's like head scratching. So here, I'm just trying to make my point. So here, how else I wanted to mention? Y'all know last week or week before, California became the first state to add a third category for gender. So you have male, female, and then they have another category. I'm not sure what it is, but it allows you to, have a third option for gender. But in any event, we have
on the college application, since my son applied last year, you have, I think, 8 gender.
Really? In California?
No.
Oh.
In the United States.
Wow, interesting.
Nobody's noticed.
And that's a meme, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So we have, in this application, you have American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Black, blah, blah, blah. And so you have that, what is your race question. Then above that, you have this question of, are you Hispanic or Latino? And it's like, why isn't that a race too, right? So, what I found out in my investigation is that race according to the federal government's official designation by way of the census, includes white, black, or African American, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, or 2 or more races. Okay? So when you look at that, if one were to think about continental African from Nigeria, which one would they fit into? What would they be? Black or African American. So my background is Native American and black, so what am I?
You're 2 or more races.
No, I'm not, because just my father is. I mean, that's my great-great-grandmother. So I self-identify as black, right? But I don't identify with being African American. I hate that term, and I'll go into that in another class about that. But I self-identify as black. And so when you look at ethnicity, it is the unofficial designate by the Census Bureau. And it's a category of people who identify with each other based on common language, ancestral, social, cultural, or national experiences. So if I self-identify with black people of the African diaspora or who are African American, why could we not be an ethnicity in comparison to a Nigerian black or South African black? Wouldn't that, according to this definition? So race is a social construct, but I don't use that as an excuse to water down racism that some people do. Things have meaning because we give them meaning, and we construct meaning in a lot of ways. But what's interesting about this designation is that a lot of this stuff gets political too. Because when you think about Cuban Americans who came to the United States after Castro, a lot of them self-identify as Hispanic, white. So you have to really aggregate census data and a lot of statistical data, because you can have a person who can, let's go back here, who can be black Hispanic or black Latino or Latinx, you know, or you can be white Hispanic, right? So that's just fascinating to me to look at how complex these kind of designations can be and how they're not free of political influences. Also, as I said, ethnicity is this unofficial category of the census, and Hispanic or not Hispanic is one classification. But what's important to note is that group is considered a minority group. So you can be a white Hispanic and enjoy the privileges of whiteness in society, but still be a part of a minority group. Isn't that fascinating? Okay. So, what's so important about preserving our history? What does history even matter in consideration of the future? Whose history has value and how is that determined? In consideration of all the people, particularly that existed in the United States. And so I kept my focus in the United States because trying to go international would have been a lot longer presentation. And so let's start with a little reflection on what it means to be American or the American experience. And so I'll start off with reflections on our colonial origins. So the Iroquois, who inhabited the area below Lake Ontario and Erie in northern New York and Pennsylvania, were more successful in resisting European advances. In 1570, 5 tribes joined to form the most democratic nation of its time called the Haudenosaunee, or League of Iroquois. The League was run by a council made up of 50 representatives from each of the 5 tribes. The council dealt with matters common to all the tribes, but it had no say in how the free and equal tribes ran their day-to-day affairs. No tribe, however, was allowed to make war itself, and the council collectively passed tribal laws. So these are the first Americans. Then in colonial America, by 1640, the British had solid colonies established along the New England coast and the Chesapeake Bay, in between where the Dutch and a teeny Swedish community existed in that area by the Chesapeake Bay. To the west were the original inhabitants of Turtle Island, and that's what Native American people called this continent we call America, Turtle Island, who came to be called Indians by the newcomers. Of course, they didn't call themselves Indians. Sometimes friendly, sometimes hostile, the eastern tribes were no longer strangers to the Europeans. And although Native Americans benefited from access to new technology and trade, the disease and thirst for land, which the early settlers also brought with them, posed a serious challenge to the Indians' long-established way of life. So the next group I want to talk about is indentured servants. So the Virginia Company developed a system of indentured servitude to attract workers to the American colonies. In contrast to slavery, indentured servants were released when they had worked their part of a legal deal. 1/2 to 2/3 of the European immigrants who came to the American colonies arrived as indentured servants. They typically worked 4 to 7 years in exchange for passage, room and board, lodging, and to pay their freedom dues. There were laws that protected some of their rights as well. However, an indentured servant's contract could be extended as punishment for breaking a law such as running away, or in the case of female servants, getting pregnant because you wasn't getting the full benefit of your servant. So this is a picture of some indentured servants in Barbados. Chattel slavery was a system and Western New World industry of enslaved African people who were to be owned forever and whose children and children's children were automatically enslaved. Sometimes you hear people conflate indentured servitude with slavery, but it's very, very different. Chattel slaves were brutalized, treated as subhuman and complete property to be bought and sold. Chattel slavery was supported and made legal by European governments and monarchs, hence distinguishing it further from indentured servitude. Slaves had no legal rights. Beginning around 1890s, new industries in the U.S. Southwest, especially mining and agriculture, attracted Mexican immigrant laborers. The Mexican Revolution of 1910 and 1920 increased the flow of war refugees and political exiles who fled to the United States to escape the violence that was occurring in Mexico. Mexicans also left rural areas in search of stability and employment. As a result, Mexican migration to the United States rose sharply. The number of legal migrants grew from around 200,000 immigrants per year in the 1910s to about 50,000 to 100,000 migrants per year during the 1920s. Now, the term Asian as an My eyesight is bad sometimes, I'm sorry. The term Asian as an idea was invented in the 1960s to bring together these groups: Chinese, Japanese, and Filipinos. Americans for strategic political purposes, so that's why that category was created. Soon, other Asian origin groups like the Korean, the Hmong, and the South Asian Indians were added. Although many Chinese, Japanese, and Filipino immigrants arrived as unskilled workers in significant numbers between 1850 to 1905, they largely settled in Hawaii and California. Many of the Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Hmong arrived in the United States as refugees following the Vietnam War. However, since 1965, shifting immigration policies have resulted in a higher proportion of highly educated Asian immigrants entering the United States. Thus, images of Asian success has led to the model minority meme. Have you all seen that before? You know, and so this was literally a Time magazine cover from 1987, and they have this title, "Those Asian American Whiz Kids." So that's just an interesting meme that evolved from this policy change. And many would make the argument that the United States participated and a kind of brain drain of other countries because they made attractive, highly educated, and skilled Asians to get an easier pathway to citizenship in the United States. So, if you look at this chart, and y'all graduate students, give me some analysis of what you see from that chart. What kind of themes could you make based upon what you see there? So here you have this color representing Black, Hispanic, Asian, white and Asian, and then you have the level of education. So if you look at this chart, what kind of summaries could you make?
If you're Black, it doesn't really matter what you do, it's not going to help.
Well, I don't know if it's totally not going to help because it's something that is helping to be an equalizer. What's helping to be an equalizer?
Education.
Education. So of course, you know, it's not even, but my goodness, look here. You got people with no high school education, but Black people's unemployment rate is more than twice than everybody's. And then you have here where you have bachelor's degree or higher and you see a little bit more equalization. And quite frankly, here you see the lowest unemployment here among whites, but here with no high school or no bachelor's degree, it was relatively even. But a Black person in that same situation experienced a higher unemployment rate. So I use this chart because I talk with a lot of young people and millennials, and they are operating under this meaning that why get an education or why go to college? This is why. Because statistically, your odds of having a better quality of life are much higher with more advanced education. And I think there's an anti-intellectualism thing that's going on around our country, telling people you don't need a college education, or even discouraging anything besides learning a trade. The advantage of a post-secondary education, whether it be formal or informal, is that you expand your mind and you learn how to think critically. Secondary education really doesn't engage you in that way. They want to, but you learn the information for the test in most instances. It's not until you get into a post-secondary educational experience that you learn to examine life more critically. And quite frankly, there was a time in compulsory education where civics class was taught. Do y'all remember that? Where you learned about the Constitution, you still young. You learned about the Constitution, you learned about the House of Representatives, you learned what state senators were. They don't teach that anymore. And so my conspiracy theory, if you will, it's called proposition in scholarship, is that there is a concerted effort to not make Americans aware and informed. So an informed citizenry is a democratic citizenry. And if you want to project themes of oligarchy, then having an educated citizenry would allow that to occur more easily. Just want to put that out there. Okay, so here's another chart. So what is this chart telling us? This is white men had higher hourly earnings than all except Asian men in 2015. So what is this chart telling us? Because it also includes gender. Somebody give me a summary of that chart, a theme that's coming out of that.
We've actually got similar patterns when you just look at all the top levels, whether it's men or women. It's just that the women's pattern is at a very lower bar than the men's.
Yes, that's true. And so gender plays a role in economic opportunity. Would that be fair to say? Also, race does too as well. You continue to see the lowest income happening among the Black and Hispanic groups, right? But again, I go back to what I talked about earlier. Data like this needs to be aggregated, because if you take Hispanic and expand it more, some of those persons might in fact be white people. And so maybe that will increase, some of the other numbers or lower some of the other numbers. But I think it's fair to say that the pattern suggests that Black women are probably the lowest hourly wage paid persons in the United States. So why are any of these things relevant to preserving cultural memory? Because even the memories we preserve are shaped by power, privilege, sexuality, race, and class. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is the dog test. Are y'all familiar with the dog test? Okay, so in 1940, Thurgood Marshall, in his argument for desegregating schools in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education test, used psychologists Mamie and Kenneth, what was their last name? Mamie and Kenneth Clark. They created this doll test. And so they took this black doll and this white doll, and they presented these dolls to children. And they asked the children to identify who is the smart child, who is the evil child, who is the mean child, who is the beautiful child. And time again, these black children attributed all the positive virtues to the white doll and all the negative virtues to the black doll. So their argument was that segregating black children was perpetuating these internalized senses of inferiority. And that if we desegregated the schools, then white children would be involved with black children, and these negative tropes would just go away magically because they're in proximity to these people and they won't hold these ideas. So the experiment was repeated in 1980. What do you think happened?
Probably the same outcome.
It was the same outcome. So that suggests to me that education is not the vehicle by which we address these things. It can reinforce them, it can be an influence, but there obviously are things that are part of our larger society, what we talked about earlier with racism, the way we do business, that is impacting how these children see themselves and how others see them. So, the experiment was repeated in 2015, but this time, different racial groups were used. So these are Latino children. And what were their perceptions? The white doll was the nice doll, and that the black doll was the bad doll. What was even more scary is this little boy, you can find this video on the internet. The researcher said, well, why is that black doll the bad doll? And that child said, because he hits others. And so that made me think about George Zimmerman immediately. And what kind of mindset was in operation for him to shoot what is essentially a child? Trayvon Martin was a child. Was he operating in all these negative tropes that exist? And my argument would be yes. So, this is what's called colorism. Have y'all heard of colorism before? This is a mimetic evolution of racism, in my opinion. So colorism is this idea that the closer you are in proximity to whiteness, the more advantageous it is to you in society. And so they essentially repeated the doll test, but used what would be considered a color gradient of skin color. And I want to share with you how those children responded.
Remember, you were asked what skin color do you want? Do you remember which one you said?
Yeah, that one.
Which one? Why do you want that skin color?
Because I don't know. I don't know.
Not sure. What do you think of that skin color?
Well, it was kind of whitish, and that's all I remember. Yeah.
Thank you. Why do you want that skin color?
Because it looks lighter than this kind, because this looks a lot like that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't like the way brown looks, because the way brown looks really nasty for some reason, but I don't know what reason.
So you think it looks nasty?
Well, not really, but sometimes.
And Brielle, they asked what color adults don't like. What do you say? Which one? That's right, that's what you said. Why do you think adults don't like that color?
Dark.
Dark. And adults, you think adults don't like dark?
Maybe some adults do, but maybe some of them don't.
And then which was the ugly child?
That one.
And why was he the ugly child?
He was the ugly child because he was the ugly one because when he tried to go to school, sometimes all the white kids would make fun of him
Why were they making fun of him?
because of the color of his skin.
Does that happen sometimes?
Not now, but back then it did.
Back in the old days?
Mhm.
Why did that happen back then?
Because I think the people in the schools didn't think that like the black kids should get education like the white kids did.
Are there now, do you see differences now between black kids and white kids?
No.
No. Do you think some kids do see differences?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, maybe some people still think that blacks are ugly and whites are nice and handsome.
Why do you think they think that?
Because of what they heard, maybe.
Why do you think things have changed? You were saying that in the old days, people with different skin colors were treated differently.
Because Martin Luther King Jr. I think helped make black and white go to the same schools and bathrooms.
And you think that changed people's opinions?
Some, but some didn't change their opinions.
So do you see different today? Is there a difference between a black person and a white person?
Not really.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. They're people. They're the same thing.
And they were asking about skin color. When you think about skin color, what do you think?
I think it's kind of magical because I think like we're not all the same, we're different. And it doesn't really matter what color you are, it just matters what you're like inside.
Do you think some people think it matters what skin color you are?
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do. I wonder why they think that.
Yeah, your color is kind of who you are. It makes you you.
Why do you think do some kids treat other kids differently because of skin color?
Probably because they're not like them, so they probably say that you're not like them, so they don't want to be their friend.
And one of you was asked about the skin color that most teachers think looks bad on a girl. And you said, I don't think it matters. They want to help you learn. What doesn't matter what's on the outside, only on the inside. You said that. Explain that. What do you mean?
Like, I don't think I think the teachers that are mature, like, they don't really care what color you are. They just, like, want you to get a good education.
Did you see any difference between those girls?
No, they all look pretty friendly.
They all look pretty friendly?
Yeah.
Do you think some people would see a difference, or do you think most people would just say they seem pretty friendly?
I think most people say that they look pretty friendly.
That's the right thing to do. You don't judge people how they look. You judge how they act.
Show me the dumb child.
Dumb child.
Okay, why is she the dumb child?
Because she has black skin.
Okay. Show me the bad child. Why is he the bad child?
Because he's really dark.
Show me the dumb child. Why is she the dumb child?
Because she looks black.
Show me the good child. Why is she the good child?
She looks lighter.
Show me the child you would like to have as a classmate. Why would you like to have him as a classmate?
Because he's white.
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like. And show me the child who has the skin color most adults don't like.
Well, show me the ugly child. And why is she the ugly child?
Because she's white.
Show me the good-looking child. And why is she the good-looking child?
Because she's light skinned.
And show me the skin color you believe most teachers think looks bad on a girl.
I don't think they think it matters.
I don't think it matters.
Like it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside, it just matters what you look like on the inside.
Can you show me the child that has your skin color? Show me the child that has the skin color you want. Okay. Show me the child who has the skin color you don't want. Show me the child you would like as a classmate. All of them. And like all of them as classmates? Why do you say all of them?
I don't really care what color they have.
So that was pretty profound, right?
Wow.
So you saw these black children who may have wanted to be black, but they wanted to be more light-skinned black. Because even children get imposed upon with these notions of anti-blackness and white superiority. And so this last part I want to do before we take a break and transition into spiral dynamic theory is talk about 21st century continental United States. And we talk about cultural memory, right? And so a lot of times, those who may be of that ilk that make America great again, it may conjure up Norman Rockwell notions of what America looked like. You have the teacher there, she literally has apples on her desk, and she has these well-behaved children who wished her happy birthday. And as a young black child seeing that kind of image, you would be like, oh wow, look at that, what a nice school. I'd like her to be my teacher. But in American society, when we try to make those moves, that was not the experience of a lot of people who tried to embrace this Norman Rockwell, I have terrible language today, Norman Rockwell notion of education and schooling that we saw in that other picture. And so issues of race becomes very complicated, and then sometimes there are some incidents where I think that the argument gets a little misdirected. And this was an incident that happened at a school in California. And so you'll see there on their signs, it says, I'm not some CMC mole. Are y'all familiar with this story? So let me go to it real quick because I put a hyperlink and I hope it works. So you had this situation where the students were protesting a vice president of student affairs. So what happened is the vice president of student affairs responded to an article written by a student at the college. And in her remarks, she said something along this line. Let's see. Okay, so here we have the quote. And the trouble for Spelman began in October when she responded to an essay published in a student newspaper, and it's called The Student Life, which covered the controversy extensively. And so the essay written by the student from a working class Mexican family discussed how low-income and minority students feel unwelcomed at the college. In an email to the essay's author, Spelman wrote that she and her staff were working on how we can better serve students, especially those who don't fit the CMC mold. I understood what she was saying. I feel like there are bigger fish to fry. This turned into a whole big campaign where, as you see there, the students were like, I'm not some mold, I'm not some, But hey, it's really different from being spit on and called the N-word than somebody having a poorly thought out response to the students' agitation. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so let's go back to where we left off. I think this is the point where we go on along. Yeah, so from current slide. All right, so we are going to take a little short break if anybody wants to go to the bathroom or anything like that. Let's continue this conversation because that's what I want to do is come back and kind of get you all's feedback.
Yeah. But you can see the little Trump voters in the
Yeah.
And so,
oh my God, it's perpetuating.
But it makes me feel good when you do see that it's. I feel like that the group of children coming up out of our high schools, and I don't know, at what point we're starting to see some positive changes, but where people don't look at color, their expectation is based on how that person is as a human being and how they're performing, and it's very encouraging to see that. I know.
Well, I want to say something a little bit about that not seeing color idea because the two little black girls, I thought that was really interesting how she responded today. And I think that we had this tendency to be very binary in our approach to stuff like that. You can respect and value a person for the content of their character, and at the same time still value and appreciate them for their uniqueness in terms of their racial or ethnic identity. I don't think it has to be a choice to move us into this colorblind society, because our society doesn't support that reality. We get messages all over the place that are these tropes of men are superior to women, whites are superior to everybody else. Yeah. And so to have that as a goal, I think is not going to move us where we need to go. And that's why spiral dynamic theory, keep my transition, is so awesome to appreciate. So did anybody want to say anything more before we move on? Yes, ma'am.
I just thought it was interesting with the kids. I mean, it was like, for a second, I was like trying not to cry. Really, okay. But I grew up in a really diverse area in Cleveland Heights, and I went to public school. So growing up, I didn't really see any color differences, like in elementary school. And then I went to private school for middle school. I went to Hawken, and that's when I really realized that I was white, and it was very shocking. Because then I went back into public school. I went to Cleveland Heights High School, and I was totally I was back where I started, but I was in a completely different place.
Right.
It was just really.
And so, that's why I think it's fair. I think it's realistic to accept the fact that because of the United States legacy of slavery, there is an anti-blackness trope that exists in our society. Because the reason why I put the indentured servants in there is because you hear some people make the argument, well, my family were Irish and they were indentured servants and they came up, they were able to, but I just showed you the big differences between the two. Those people were never considered property. It may have been to some people, but there was always this idea that you could get out of it. You were to be a slave forever, and your children were to be a slave forever. And this is my, perspective coming from a Christian, because I believe it's against our nature to dominate other human beings. And that the only way you can do that is to devalue them and not see them as human. Because I think that a normal, healthy person would really have a problem with slavery. There has to be some kind of quirk in your thinking and your values and your beliefs for you to be able to participate in that kind of industry, in my view. Because like you said, you went to a predominantly black school, but you never felt uncomfortable about being not black there. But you went to a white school where the racism, the structural racism requires that you make a choice. That's why I want to be optimistic about our children. I love, because I don't know if I mentioned to y'all, I teach part-time in Columbus City Schools. So when I'm on break, I always go back to be a role model to kids, and also to kind of keep my ear to the ground of what's happening with teaching and learning, because I want their education to remain relevant for the 21st century. So I use that as part of my research and also to inform my teaching and learning. In any event, I see that idea about, they all look pretty nice to me among the small children. But as they progress in life, they get these messages that come from a variety of places, come from our television, come from our music, come from our movie, comes from our literature and materials that we teach, that undermine this idea that we're all the same. It reinforces notions of white superiority and in some instances black inferiority, or the gradient of blackness. Where you saw the one little girl who, even though she didn't necessarily want to be white, she wanted to be a lighter skinned black, because she's come to realize that there are some social advantages to being less dark and being more light. Okay? All right. So we gotta go ahead and move forward with spiral dynamic theory. So this is a theoretical framework. I use it much in my scholarship, and certainly I use this for my dissertation. And so spiral dynamic theory is a comprehensive theory of how adults develop over time. It examines the ways of thinking and the deep values that are reflected in distinct worldviews that we hold, or paradigms that I talked about earlier. Spiral dynamic theory does not explain personality, so I want to make that distinction. It's not like Briggs or Myers and that stuff. It is simply a way to identify constructs of how people think based upon their deep value systems. And I'll go into more detail about that. It also is not an IQ assessment, because you can have a person who by most standards is very intelligent. They could have gone to Harvard, MIT, but they still can hold very simplistic ways of viewing the world. It's based on research by Claire Graves of healthy normal adults. So I need to say that. This is not a framework to deal with psychological pathology. So, spiral dynamic theories was created by Claire Graves. He actually didn't use that term. His proteges took his theory and used it in writing a book called Spiral Dynamics. So that's why I call it spiral dynamic theory. Because the original theory by Graves was called the emergent cyclical level of existence theory. And it was his model for adult development. And what was so awesome and unique about his theory is that he primarily focused on adults. Most of the scholarship in his day looked at children and adolescents in terms of development. So you had these theories from Piaget, you had these theories from Wachowski that looked at children and adolescents. Even Erickson did some work with adolescents and maybe some adults, but Claire's was exclusively adult. And so his theory incorporates this notion I talked about earlier of memes, even though he didn't never use that term, because that term actually happened afterwards, after he died, I believe, because he died in 1986. And so he used this framework uses memes to explain these deep value systems that we have. So spiral dynamic theory is unique from some other types of maturation or development theory in that it has these hierarchies of ontological worldviews, or these hierarchies of what people consider to be real. It moves from a very simplistic way of thinking to a more complex, integral, higher order form of thinking. And what makes it unique from any other theories that I've seen to date is that it is an open-ended framework. So Claire Graves held that as adults mature, they have this open-ended capacity for learning, problem solving, neurological expansion. So when you look at stuff like Maslow, remember Maslow has a hierarchy and then you reach self-actualization. So in his theory, adulthood or adult maturation peaks. Some other people have that. I think Erickson's framework goes to where you have this end stage. And also a gentleman, a scholar by the name of Keegan, who does specifically adult development, has the same idea of you reach this higher form of consciousness. And so Claire Graves' theory is open-ended because according to his research, he found that as soon as you resolve one existential crisis, that resolution creates a new problem. And so then you have to think of another way to resolve that problem. And after you resolve that problem, you go to a phase where you go into another existential crisis. And so on and on and on. So spiral dynamic theory also has very high level value to me because of how it operates in 3 domains. It has applications on the individual, the organizational, and the societal level. And of course that makes sense, right? Because organizations are made up of people, and people make up societies. It is a predictive framework of the deep differences, the core intelligences, and the problem-solving capacity of adults as they mature. So it looks at those aha moments that we have that are temporal, and then introduce us to the problems and how we respond to those. So let's talk about the levels of human values that are part of the spiral dynamic theory framework. So we all have these surface values, and these surface values are made up of the religions, the common sense things that we all understand and know, laws. You don't spit on your teacher, you don't cuss out your pastor, that's common sense. And these are our surface values that we have no problem sharing with people and letting people see openly, and that we're very conscious of them. Then below the surface, we have these hidden values. And these are long-standing beliefs and attitudes and traditions that undergird our surface values. we don't necessarily want people to know about these hidden values we have, but we are still conscious of them, but we might not overtly share them with others who aren't very close to us. But even deeper than the hidden values are our deep values. And these are the unconscious layers of who we are and how we think that subsequently directs our hidden values and our surface values. And that's where we find spiral dynamic theory. So when considering the preservation of cultural memory and history, it's important to know who I am. Excuse me. And to also know that who I am is constantly changing sometimes. And I'm going to come back to that. In what ways might we appropriate and pass on our deep values and worldviews that get expressed as our collective cultural memory? And this again is where I return to memes. Remember how I talked about memes are these units of culture that get passed from person to person through non-genetic means? We imitate what we get from other people. So let's go to the framework and identify what are the meta worldview constructs of spiral dynamic theory. So this is a framework, and I shared this with you all. And so the framework, as I said, goes from the simplistic to the more complex in this kind of zigzag fashion. So what happens is you have this on the right side, this individualist orientation, and on the left side you have this collectivist orientation. So all of these things on this side of the framework are more individualistic, and these are more collectivist. So you start off with this very basic instinctual principle, and then you go to this more collectivist, individualist, collectivist, individualist, collectivist, et cetera, et cetera. And again, even though I stop here, this framework continues on based upon how Claire Graves saw it in operation for adult maturation. The other thing to note about this framework is that it has two tiers. He held, and I don't know how he came up with this statistic, that 90% of the people that we experience in life today operate on this tier 1 level, which he describes as the subsistence level, where we're concerned about meeting our basic needs. So people in this tier 1 level are concerned about how am I going to pay for college, how am I going to pay for my daughter's wedding, how am I going to eat, how am I going to keep somebody from not breaking in my house. You know, these kind of everyday normal problems that most of us experience in more severe to less severe circumstances. At level 2 is where you start to see more integration of a person's thinking. These systems are what he calls subsuming, which again makes the theory unique from others. In other words, as you advance along the framework and develop this higher order thinking, you still retain those worldviews that you had from the previous system. They just don't have as much relevance because you've learned to negotiate life in a more expanded way. So the way you may have resolved a problem in the past with fisticuffs would not be appropriate in a church environment or in a school environment or in a work environment. And so the other thing that was fascinating and I found to be also true in my research is Claire Graves held that change was not inevitable. Because you have this trope, this meme, this idea that everything changes. That is not true. You and I both know people who think the same way now that they thought 10 years ago, and they have no desire to change that thinking for a variety of reasons. So one could live out their existence with a Homer Simpson worldview, where just going to work every day or just making the donuts and coming home is enough for them. I don't think we can judge those people, but we need to accept the reality is that is how they felt works best for them in their negotiation of life. Make sense? Okay. So, for my research that I'm currently doing, I focus on these first 6 levels. I do have those higher 2. Claire Graves, actually in his research, only started to explore these last 2 systems, and I've really kind of gone beyond what he's done in making this a little bit richer with my research, and then examining these 2 worldview constructs in my research. So again, spiral dynamic theory is expansive. It moves from this very simplistic, limited complexity to a more complex, higher order thinking. And it does so in a spiral-like fashion. As you can see, there's this graphic depiction that you become more expansive. You also retain those lower levels as you move forward. And he, in fact, held that the majority of us operate in a daily basis in 3 neighboring systems. So if you were to look at this diagram, and the predominance of the way in which you view the world was more green, we would possibly see orange and yellow notions or ways of your thinking being expressed, even though you may be more centralized in your larger worldview in the green system. Does that make sense to everybody?
So like if you wake up one day and you don't want to do anything at all, like you're living in the bottom, like beige, purple, and red sort of
Good
thing.
question. I'm going to show you the distinction and show you why that's not true, because that's what I'm going to get into next. So let's start with the first. Sure.
I'm sorry, what are the initials? Like the JWI?
Yeah, that's when you go into more depth with the system. But the first letter represents your neurological capacity. The second level represents a particular type of problem. So you have this neurology to deal with this kind of problem. And when you get incongruence, that's when you either have progression upward or regression backwards in the way that you respond to problems. Okay? So this is the first system. And also you note the colors, because the colors just serve as a mnemonic device to help people remember the systems. But I'm going to go into detail about that particular worldview now for you and give you some examples. So here, he has the beige level, which is really what his proteges created colors. But this was what's called the instinctual level. And of course, he could not interview cavemen to develop this data. So he relied a lot on anthropological records for the first and second stage. Most of the development that he did with the red, blue, green, and orange came from his psychology students who were in his class. And he asked them to write essays and respond to experiments that he was doing in order to have them express what they felt was the mature adulthood. So he used that as a source of his scholarship. But in the case of this level, he used anthropological records for this and purple. And so in this particular worldview, one is centered around satisfaction of biological human needs. And you'll see a lot of Maslow kind of notions here because he and Maslow were actually friends. And so you are centered around the satisfaction of biological human needs, this desire for food, water, shelter, and protection from danger. One is driven by instinct and genetics, so there is little awareness of self as a distinct, complex being. One lives off the land much like an animal. People have little impact or control over their living environments. Existence is centered around survival, and there is no self-awareness again. Low order, non-complex thinking and operation. Examples associated with this kind of being level have been used in nursing, where they describe newborn infants, because infants just cry, poop, and laugh. You know, they don't really have awareness that's around them. They're kind of working off the biological imperatives, even though some might argue against that, because there's some really smart babies out there. But in general, also this particular worldview construct has been used to identify maybe mentally ill, homeless people. They don't have that kind of self-awareness that a healthy, normal person has. Again, like I said, his research is based on healthy adults, so these are kind of associations other people have used to kind of describe this particular level. And also, first human societies he associated with this kind of worldview. The next one is called the purple worldview level, and I describe that as being clannish. In this worldview, okay, we move from the individualist structure meta framework to the more collectivist. So you have this imperative about obeying the desire of some mystical spiritual being, right? It shows allegiance to elders. There is a privileging of systems of matriarchy and patriarchy. There's an adherence to group customs, and clan preservation is held in high regard. Preserving sacred places, objects, and rituals are privileged in this worldview system. Clan bonds together to endure problems and find safety. One lives in an enchanted spiritual and magical world. There is a seeking to achieve harmony with nature's power. So this worldview clip, I felt represented the system well, and I'll go into more detail about that after you watch it.
You don't think that anything he's doing is helping the situation? Is he an improvement over Stephen Harper? I mean, talk.
Excuse me, did I just hear you correctly? How can he be blamed for that? No. Excuse me. Don't speak to us that way.
Stop right now. You do not speak to us that way. We are human beings, and the way that you're speaking to us
It's not acceptable.
You are not.
No, stop it. Stop it right now.
We don't want you here. Please,
Step out. Step out. Then I don't want to hear from you.
You have no right.
You don't speak to us like that.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, the way you communicate.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not arguing.
No, stop. Stop. You need to stop. You need to stop. Stop. Kipishchi.
You do.
Mona tindoy na mitin chamane na miyak. Asha washkat kitos chamane na minam. Gigas chakash no ay mani na miyak. Tapos coach kain inuyak. Kwani ispanik. Kwani magamosha ko may tagtago siyak. Tapos coach ikas chakagipat na siyak. You're a guest here, and you don't even know how to speak to us. You don't even recognize the tone in your voice and your delivery. And no, you're done. You're done. Next question.
I'll re-answer this question. How do you think? Yes. How do you think?
You better be respectful.
I'm being totally respectful. I'm asking how Justin Trudeau's record compared to Stephen Harper's record. Do you think he's improved the situation? That's what I'm asking.
We have a holistic genocide happening here.
Don't speak on behalf of.
And I can speak for myself. You know what, white people? You've had your voice here for 524 years. 524 years you've been visible, white lady. You've been visible for 524 years. Look how fast your white man comes and steps up for you. Where is everybody else to come and step up for us? I have a right to my voice. I'm still fighting for my voice and my visibility. And I'm telling you right now, there has been 524 years of holistic genocide on Turtle Island. We're the ones that are dying. It's not you that is dying. And as far as how Justin Trudeau is doing, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is we're asking the United Nations to help us that charges of genocide, a war against humanity, war crimes, and a crime of aggression be laid. Because your Liberal Party was also responsible. Every party, every governance that has been in power. There's been a war conflict of Indian Residential School, 60 Scoop, Indian Day School, and Millennium Scoop. None of your governments have clean hands. All of your governments have blood on their hands. None of you are different. You haven't changed because you haven't started your healing journeys. The moment that we have our voice and our backbone, you want to shut us down. And you think you're privileged to disrespect us. The moment we tell you, because of your colonial mindset and your colonial way of being, your white privilege, your white fragility, you can't take our truth. Look how many people came to bat for you, white lady, and you're a guest here. Without us, you'd be homeless. This is over.
Okay, so You saw the feathers, you saw her chanting, you saw the matriarchal system, how the elders stepped up and the children went back. So those are some of the characteristics of that particular worldview. With all of the collectivist systems, the ones that are called the cooler temperature colors, the blue, the greens, and oranges, the locus of control is very external. In the individualistic system, the locus of control is very internal. And so we move from that very collectivist system to now a more individualistic system that is reflected in the red system. And so in this system, the world exists as the haves and those that don't have. So you have this very have and have not dichotomy. Avoidance of shame and a demand for respect is privilege in this system, and one defends their reputation. There is low impulse control, and one looks to immediate gratification. Remember, we're moving from simplistic systems to more complex systems or ways of viewing the world. One will fight remorselessly and without guilt in order to break free of any imposed constraints. It does not exercise the benefit of foresight in the system because this person or this system, I don't want to say person so much, but it is a worldview. They are of the mindset that the future consequences aren't important because they may or may not come. This worldview deals in the immediate now, not the future. One values power and domination and the view that life is a jungle. And so here is the first level of what's considered self-awareness. Yes?
I'm having trouble seeing this as a higher level than the purple.
Well, if you go...
I would be inclined to flip them.
Well, we will see as we go on because, to be honest with you, there were elements in the chief that was speaking that was red. So at one time you had Native Americans who were kind of like about this community sharing, and then you found out that's problematic for us. We need to be more self-preserving. And so you get this movement into warring against the Europeans and killing them in some instances. When you think about the feudal system, that is representative of this way of knowing. So can you see the progression there? You know, we want to have these Disney views about how human nature works, but it isn't like that. If I start off and I'm giving and then you take advantage of me, I'm going to say this is problematic. I need to do something to be more self-preserving. And so that's why we move to this next system. So, yes, ma'am.
What did the reporter ask, or the journalist ask? I didn't know.
I don't know, really. I think that she felt like she was disrespectful because they were complaining that the politician in that area wasn't doing enough for them, and she seemed to be of a different opinion.
Okay.
Like, you are ungrateful.
I just wasn't sure what she was.
It seemed like they were comparing what maybe two different government officials had delivered.
Right.
Different white guys?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was hard because we didn't have the whole.
That's right. I'm only giving you clips. I apologize. Because the bigger thing for me was you to see the associations to how they were viewing the world. But I'm sure if you did a search, you'd probably find more detail about it. I just have a limitation how much time I have in the classes. So I don't know if anybody's a Game of Thrones fan in here, because this is actually the clip I used to be representative of this particular worldview. It's hard to see this one because it's a little bit.
You're not one of mine, are you? No, my lord. Didn't think so. Too pretty. Where are my damn moron sons? Blackwalter and Luther promised to be here by midday.
They're here, my lord.
Well, what are they doing? Trimming their cunt hairs? Tell them to come here, now.
They're already here, my lord. Here, my lord. They weren't easy to carve.
especially Black Waldo.
My name is Arya Stark. I want you to know that the last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die.
So, we move to our next system, which is represented by the color blue. And you may find yourself going through some emotions as you watch this, because remember, these are worldviews that each of us may hold. And some of these will make us very uncomfortable because we don't look at the world that way, right? And we can't necessarily relate. But at the same time, we do ourselves a disservice not to understand that some people do view the world this way. Okay, so the next system moves us back to the more collectivist orientation. And I find that in college and university settings, that most people are more comfortable around the more collectivist kind of notions. But then there are some who can identify with some of the others as well. So in this system, or in this worldview, there is this attention towards sacrificing self for some idealized path or pursuit of meaning in life. It's very purposeful. So notions of martyrdom are held in esteem in this particular worldview. One seeks to bring order and stability to all things that are perceived as chaotic. So enacting rules, policies, constraints about how one or how people or how systems and communities should conduct themselves is held of value in this system. Controlling personal impulses and desires and being sensitive to the feelings of guilt. So you don't want to upset the powers that be, the authorities, and be subject to feeling of guilt because you didn't follow the expected righteous pathway. There is an enforcing of rules and righteous living under a divine plan that assigns people to a particular space in life, and that's where your station is. Obedience and following the rules of authority figures are privileged in this system, even to your own detriment. So, destiny is controlled by a single divine, omnipotent force, whether that be God, whether that be something external to you. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the locus of control is very external in these collectivist systems. High attention is given to what is right, proper, and good. So this split represents that particular worldview. Can everybody hear this?
I think human nature is to, like, just make them like you or do things in their favor.
Okay. When we were young, we naturally wished to please our parents, our teachers, our ministers and rabbis. Even as adults, we wish to please authority figures, such as our boss at work. However, if obedience to authority causes us to ignore our own ethical standards, big trouble can result. Okay.
There was a time when we ran out of like some really bold coffee, and my manager was just like, just give them the light one. Like, they're not gonna know, coffee is coffee. I kind of felt bad because it wasn't what they wanted and wasn't what they were paying for. But I was like, okay, well, if the manager says yes, then here's the bold coffee.
When people in organizations make decisions, they are often much more concerned about the acceptability of the decision to the people to whom they are accountable than they are about the content of the decision itself. Studies show CFOs are more likely to illicitly manage earnings when it profits their CEOs than when it profits themselves. In other words, they act unethically primarily to please their bosses, not to put money in their own pockets.
I worked at CVS Pharmacy, and every week we would have different sales, and a lot of times regular customers, they would find these sales and use manufacturer's coupons. So basically they were getting more money back than they were paying, and even though it was technically right, it was harming our store, and so my manager didn't like that. My manager just told me to say that we were sold out of them so that the customer couldn't buy anymore. It kind of made me a little uncomfortable just because I didn't have a reason really to lie at all. I don't know the person, but I kind of just did it because it was something small and my boss told me to.
Private emails sent by stock analysts during the dot-com boom often indicated that the analysts wished they had the courage to stand up to their superiors and call them like they saw them. But usually, these analysts failed to do so. Instead, they continued to knuckle under to supervisory pressure to hype questionable stocks so that their firms could gain investment banking business. Most of us simply do not realize how much our desire to please superiors and our consequent tendency to defer to authority will cloud our ethical judgment when the time comes to make decisions.
Okay.
If it's an authority figure like a boss that you really like, or you really need to like you, that I have a tendency to commit to something without thinking about what else I have. So if a boss asks me to stay late, I may say, yes, of course I can, because I want to do this project right. I want to make sure you like it. It's ready when you want it to be, without thinking about previous engagements I've made to other people and disappointing other people in my life, or attending to my own needs, which can kind of conflict with what I actually need to do outside of my job.
A study of nurses by Hoffling and Brotzman found that when members of one group of nurses were asked whether they would follow a physician's instructions to give a patient an injection of an obviously excessive dose of a drug that was not even on the hospital's approved list, almost all the nurses said they would not do so. But when a second group of nurses were actually given such instructions, virtually every one of them was prepared to do so before they were stopped by the experimenters.
As a freshman, I got elected to student government as a business school representative, and I would just feel so much pressure to please the executive board. Right away, I found myself in a situation where maybe I was voting to please the executive board and to make them think well of me so that I would get certain perks and promotions. It's one of those things where it's unconscious until it comes to fruit. And then afterwards, you're very conscious of what you just did.
More concerning than people consciously acting unethically in order to stay in their boss's good graces is the fact that sometimes employees are so intent upon pleasing their superiors that they do not even notice the ethical aspects of a decision. Eagle Bud Crow, who became infamous as head of the plumbers unit operating out of President Nixon's White House, was instructed to oversee a break-in at the office of the psychiatrist of Daniel Ellsberg, who had leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times, embarrassing the Nixon administration. Crow later explained that he was so intent upon pleasing his superiors, who were, after all, among the most powerful people in the world, that he never even activated his own ethical sense to judge the morality of what he was trying to accomplish. He did not see the ethical dimensions of his situation until it was too late. Bud Crow's experience should be a warning to us all. While it is usually a fine thing for us to please our supervisors, we must keep a lookout for ethical issues. And we must never defer so completely to our bosses that we substitute their orders for our own ethical standards.
Okay.
I'm homosexual, I'm gay. And my mom asked me when I was younger to like go and, I don't know, talk to my pastor about it and like basically to see what was wrong with me. After a while, I told her, you know, I personally am not okay with this because I'm not hurting anyone. You know, knowing they were going to be angry about it instead of just lying about it, that was hard. But in the long run, I think it helped me out because it helped me be a prouder person. And it did help me come to the point to where it feels good to be truthful. I think just listening to that inner voice is key.
The sort of environment that would help me be able to speak up is one where you're treated as an equal, at least on a personal level,
remember that there's really big consequences to acting unethically sometimes, and just one time can destroy a program, can destroy a person, like what they've worked for their entire life.
I think if you keep those ideas in mind, it'll be easier for you to say, that's not ethical, and I'm not going to do that.
Wasn't that fascinating? Can you see the progression happening? Okay, so, does anybody know what these are? Tiles. Did you not know what it was? No. Okay. Anybody, oh, you the one that said tiles? Okay, so if you were to look at any of those spiral dynamic theory systems we covered, which ones do you think would see this as something viable?
Viable?
Mm-hmm. I'm choosing my words carefully.
Red.
Okay. What else? Why do you say red?
Because red kind of like struck me as like a very like physically prominent group.
You got it. What else though, when you think about it? When you think about that scripture in the Bible that says, spare the rod, spoil the child. Have y'all heard that before? And people saying that, whooping your kids will keep them, in line and following authorities. So which one else would that might apply to? Purple. Not purple. Blue. Following the rules, obeying the divine power, or the divine purposeful life. Definitely red, but also a part blue. Okay, so this is our next system, and I'm going to give you a caveat. There's some profanity in here, okay? So this is, if you're sensitive about that, be forewarned, you're allowed to leave. But it's not real bad, but it's a clip from the Wolves of Wall Street. So in this next system, this next movement up, we make that oscillation back from collectivist to more individualistic. And again, these clips that I'm showing you, maybe in some instances, there's like levels to that. But I really felt that it was important for me to draw the distinctions between the levels. So here you have someone who values autonomy and profiteering and independence. One seeks the good life through gaining material abundance. There is a methodical search for the best solution in approach to problem solving or in approach to issues. There is a privileging of science and technology as tools for obtaining enhanced living. That's why I describe this system as positivistic, where there is this privileging of data. This is the kind of worldview that says, well, the numbers don't lie. Well, these are the facts. There's this belief that there is some factual reality that can be achieved through the use of science and technology. One enjoys competition and plays to win. It shows constraint risk, unlike what we saw in the red system where you saw the unconstrained risk taking. So in this system, you have a sense of future consequences. So you start to see an expansion of the ability to think more critically. And so there's a showing of constraint as it relates to risk, and manipulation is used in order to achieve success. In this system, one values learning from what are tried and true experiences and methods. And again, as I said earlier, decisions are made after researched inquiry.
All right, we'll allow you to focus for a second. See those little black boxes? They're called telephones. I'm going to let you on a little secret about these telephones. They're not going to dial themselves, okay? Without you, they're just worthless hunks of plastic. Like a loaded M16 without a trained Marine to pull the trigger. And in the case of the telephone, it's up to each and every one of you, my highly trained Stratonites, my killers who will not take no for an answer, my fucking warriors, who will not hang up the phone until their client either buys or fucking die! Let me tell you something. There is no nobility in poverty. I have been a rich man and I have been a poor man, and I choose rich every fucking time. Because at least as a rich man, when I have to face my problems, I show up in the back of a limo wearing a $2,000 suit and a $40,000 gold fucking watch. Right, boys, dig it out! Hit him! Hit the fuck out with me! Now, if anyone here thinks I'm superficial or materialistic, go get a job at fucking McDonald's, because that's where you fucking belong! But before you depart this room full of winners, I want you to take a good look at the person next to you. Go on. Because sometime in the not so distant future, you're going to be pulling up to a red light, and you beat up old fucking Pinto, and that person's going to be pulling up right alongside you in their brand new Porsche with that beautiful wife by their side who's got big voluptuous tits. And who are you going to be sitting next to? Some disgusting wildebeest with 3 days of razor stubble and a sleeveless moo crammed in next to you in a carload full of groceries from the fucking Price Club. That's who you're going to be sitting next to. So you listen to me and you listen well. Are you behind on your credit card bills? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Is your landlord ready to evict you? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Does your girlfriend think you're a fucking worthless loser? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. I want you to deal with your problems by becoming rich. All you have to do today is pick up that phone and speak the words that I have taught you. And I will make you richer than the most powerful CEO in the United States of fucking America. I want you to go out there and I want you to ram Steve Madden's stock down your clients' throats till they fucking choke on it. Till they choke on it and they buy 100,000 shares. That's what I want you to do. You be ferocious. You be relentless. You be telephone fucking terrorist. Now let's knock this motherfucker out of the park.
Crazy, huh? Now, did you see some elements of red?
Yeah.
Right. Because if you look at the framework, what you'll find is those systems that are horizontal to each other are very similar. But that the one that's higher up has a more complex way of thinking. He used all of those things that you saw. He manipulated everybody. He made them fight over the watch. And see, what happens in this worldview is that you don't want to arouse the ire of people as you manipulate them. But you still are operating like the person in the red system who wants power and control of people, and they already know they got to watch their back. This person doesn't want to watch their back, but they still want the same kind of advantages that you see with the person in the red system, right? Okay, is it starting to, yeah.
Is that a real life thing or is that a movie?
That's a movie.
It's from a movie?
Yeah, it was on Wall Street. You should see it. It's
Oh, that's right. You said that. I never seen
Yeah. I know, it's disturbing. Like I told you, some of these things are going to unsettle some people because you don't think like that. So this one.
Nazi Germany right there.
Oh, but there you go. That's an excellent analogy. When you talk about Hitler and you think about the things he did, he would be very much orange and even part blue because he thought what he was doing was right. Yeah.
In a very nonpartisan way, pieces of Donald Trump in red and orange, too.
I could definitely see that. Yep. Okay, so that was fascinating. And then, you know, when you think about it in terms of, remember, this framework goes from simplistic to more higher order thinking. And just because you got a degree from MIT or Cornell or Harvard doesn't necessarily mean you have a complex view of the world.
So this is like, money is the motivator and your material belongings are what elevates you in the societal hierarchy.
You got it. In orange system?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Can I move forward, guys? Yeah. This is going to be fun when we start doing these scenarios. So this next one is the green colored worldview construct that labeled as relativistic. So in this worldview, you're exploring the interbeing of self in connection to that of others. Because remember how I said we oscillate between that individualism and that collectivism? So now we move back to more a collectivist orientation because the previous system has become problematic at that stage. And so you make this movement to this more collectivist green system. And then also there's a promotion of a sense of community and unity in this particular worldview. Sharing the resources of the society among all is privileged in this system. One seeks to liberate humans from greed and imposing dogma. So you see how the previous system became unsatisfactory and became problematic as this person's worldview started to expand. So decisions are reached through group consensus building. Attention to the ecosystem and the natural environment is privileged. And here in this system, there is a valuing of a spirituality that is unimposing in pursuit of harmony.
Communal living, well, pretty prominent within a certain particular type of privileged millennial is a thing.
Yeah.
We have the belief that it's actually something that will be more mainstream within a certain amount of years' time. I think what we're trying to do is lay the infrastructure by which non-traditional communities can go ahead and embrace this style of living.
So it definitely should not just be millennial white dudes.
No.
Everyone in New York is super lonely. That may be why communal living is having a moment. More and more people are passing up studio apartments to live in group housing, sometimes paying more to do so. One company in Williamsburg, known as Pure House, brands itself as an intentional living community.
We're in a former old doll factory. It's been turned into a bunch of artist lots. I hope it's haunted, but it hasn't been yet.
For New Yorkers whose identities have been swallowed up by the vast nothingness of the city, Pure House promises to focus on curating distinct groups of people and their passions.
Hi.
Sam, good to meet you. Good to meet you, Sam.
Membership in Pure House gets you a private bedroom in one of 3 homes located within walking distance in Williamsburg.
It's a low ceiling, but it's high enough to stand up. Do you think this is a growing movement in the country, or is it still happening in little pockets?
I mean, communal living has been going on for centuries.
Yeah, since we were living together in caves.
But what's happening now, and this is part of a huge shift, I mean, our lives have become so efficient, and now people are looking for more meaning, more purpose, more community, more connection, more culture, connection with themselves and others. This is what I think is fueling this growing movement, and there are all these different gradients. So on the We Live side, we're talking about what I think of as kind of like condo living 2.0, but there isn't any kind of a operating system, so to speak, that allows for some sort of a kind of communal experience. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have intentional communities, the kinds of things that are referred to as communes. Things like Pure House tend to be more in the middle.
Rooms at Pure House range between $1,500 and $1,800 and include occasional meals, yoga, and massages. By comparison, the more corporate communal housing at We Live in Lower Manhattan runs about $1,700 with no massages. You could rent a room in New York for cheaper, but these places provide intangibles that seem worthwhile to a lot of people, like this weekly dinner where they talk about sex.
Is there a sexual act you really enjoy doing?
When you're about to go down on a partner, but like you're kissing their stomach and like really into as you're moving it out and like.
What brought you to Pure House?
When I moved to New York the first year, I was alone. I felt alone, doesn't matter how many people I met in school, and I feel that I don't have any kind of home to go back to. I was looking for an apartment, and then I found Pure House on one of the apps, and I got to the website, and I was like, that's what I want to.
What do you think is behind the movement?
We've gone from a society of like belonging to like a very individualistic society, but that feeling of wanting to belong somewhere doesn't necessarily go away. This allows you kind of the best of both worlds. There is a sense of belonging because everyone's passionate, but there is a sense of diversity where everyone's passionate about something else.
That's different things.
Yeah.
Not about only about sharing the spaces. I think it's about sharing the conscious.
you know, of like we are a group, we are like, you know, a community, and we help each other, and we provide for each other. I think it will be ideal for society to be a little bit more open,
more communal.
More
And
communal.
recognize that humanity
Yeah.
is one common body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, that's
We
the
are
fact.
not all these
We all are
separated
one. We all are one.
Right, right.
So it's
And yet
like,
if you just go like yelling down the subway platform, people look at you funny.
Yeah.
They should.
They should.
The fact that people are willing to pay more to share space than to have their own is telling. Social interaction is fundamental, a prerequisite for good health, and people are realizing that.
We're kind of restarting this mission at the beginning being like, what happens when you value share in a space where not everyone is white?
Remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen. Check in with us in like, you know, a year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So it seems like the key to a good communal living experience is diversity. And of course, you want to make sure you're not joining a cult.
Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
talk you through. We're doing just eye gazing, and it's just way simple. You're already doing it, and it's
Yeah,
great.
I know. I make eye contact all the time.
So just like take your hand and just like put it on your lower belly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything in my eyes? Because people tell me like I'm not human or whatever.
I see that you're not blinking a lot.
Okay.
Everybody was crazy for that one. So I always ask everybody after showing that video, what would you classify that guy as in terms of the spiral dynamic theory framework? Where would you see him at?
Seems very conservative.
What did you say? Yep. That's what everybody says, and I say, yeah, correct. Also, did you notice he's a physician?
No.
Yeah, at the beginning when they show his name, he has MD at the end of it. So when you think about people who typically are in health professions, teachers, doctors, I would see that more spiral dynamic blue. But when you think about maybe lawyers, Wall Street people, I can kind of see the orange a little bit more with them. Even though there may be some elements of blue there, possibly even green. I guess people who work for ACLU, I don't know. Okay, so we just finished the first tier level, and we're going to move to the next tier. And I want to reiterate again, remember I talked about the first level being the subsistence level. So at that level, you have this preoccupation with pretty much everyday living, paying your bills, having relationships, and things like that. And at the next level, you don't have that preoccupation. Then you have reached a more, money is not an issue for you in life. You know, and you'll see that when I show you the examples of these people. But with my research in Chile, I looked at I did a comparison of the graduate students who are at traditional public university and those who are at private for-profit university. Now, much like the United States, Chile has a really big divide between its wealthy class and its very, very poor class. And so most of the people who attended the private for-profit university, as an aggregate, they had higher incomes. And so what I was surprised to find is that I saw more yellow and blue operating among them. And so when I stepped back to evaluate that, I thought about when you have more resources, when you have more money and not preoccupation with some of the more everyday things everybody else, that opens you up to more opportunities that could potentially expand your mind. You have resources to travel abroad more. You may have more free time to go to museums or engage in culture, which will allow for an expansion of your worldview versus somebody who may never leave their neighborhood, let alone even be on an airplane. So we're going to move into the tier 2 level. The other thing to remember about tier 2 is it's called the integral level because according to Claire Graves, and I've also seen this in my research, once you've gotten to the tier 2 level, you are able to look down the spiral. In essence, you can recognize those worldviews in other people. That's why a lot of times people say that tier 2 people make better managers because they have the capacity to relate to people more expandedly than what you see in some of the maybe more myopic worldviews that you see in tier 2. So here in this yellow, what I call system awaken phase, you see a higher order integration and unifying of thinking and personal being consciousness. One accepts the inevitable flex and flow of life and nature. And so here at this particular worldview level, you don't have any problem with negotiating dichotomies in life. And that you understand that in life, there are big T's that people hold as truth, but there also exists little T's that people hold as truth. And that there are inevitably uncertainties that we are going to face in life. You cannot predict everything that is to happen, where you might think more applicable in the blue spiral dynamic theory worldview. This particular worldview embraces personal freedom that does not harm others or overindulge in self-interest. So even though it is oriented on the more individualistic side of the framework, once you get to tier 2, Claire Gray said that you started to see a more integration of that notion of individualism and collectivism. So you kind of have this collectivist individualist kind of expression. But it still is individualistic, and I'll show you that. Experiences that, in this particular worldview, one looks to experience the fullness of life on earth, one recognizes diversity and its multiple facets. So, in this system, there is a demand that the existence of an integrated open system be in place for negotiating life, and that this system supports creativity and promotes ingenuity. And who better to represent this worldview than our dear Oprah?
You know, in all of the years of doing the Oprah show, there were many days that I sat in my chair across from 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 or 7 people, and I would be so frustrated because I just wanted to shake people sometimes and say, why didn't you pay attention to your life? I said on the show, probably the producers tell me that they counted 33 times, but I know I thought it at least 1,000 times. I would say listening to your life as it whispers to you first, so that it does not have to knock you upside the head with a brick or come crashing down on you as a brick wall, is one of the greatest principles of life, because there are many things that happen in life that are beyond our control. Natural disasters, death, unexplained events. But there are also many, many, many things in life which we can control and become out of control because you're just not paying attention. You are sleepwalking through your life. And I have seen this so many times on the show. I wanted to take the guests and go, would you just pay attention? So this is what I've learned and how I've explained it to myself. Life whispers to you all the time. Your life is speaking to you all around. From the time you wake up in the morning and every single experience that's coming into your personal space, into your physical space, all of those experiences are speaking to you. They're telling you something about your life and about your circumstances. It whispers, and if you don't get the whisper gets louder. If you don't get the whisper, when it gets louder, it gets, I call it like a little pebble, like a little thump upside your head. When I was a kid, if I was doing something my grandmother didn't like, she'd just turn around and thump me. She wouldn't even look at me. She'd just give me a thump, and I'd know that's my cue to stop it, or we're gonna get worse. The whisper is the message. The pebble or the thump upside the head, usually it's gone into a problem. You don't pay attention to the problem becomes a brick upside your head. The brick upside your head is a crisis. You don't pay attention to the brick upside your head, the crisis turns into a disaster, and the whole house brick wall comes falling down.
Did you guys see how she delineated that whole path? And how she kind of like did it in a very systematic way. And so, I thought that the way she articulated there was a good representation of that yellow worldview system. So this next one is the turquoise system, which I call the holistic one. So here you have finding harmony through a strong collectivist individualism. And going back to Oprah, when you heard her talk, you heard a lot of I statements. So she's still, yes.
I'm just kind of observing. So does intuition kind of come into existence in the second tier?
Yes, it does. In the teal level, and I'm going to talk about that. You're so perceptive, very good. This gets me excited because it makes me know that people are getting it. So here you have this focus on the good of all living entities as codependent integrated systems. There is this seeking to expand use of the human brain mind tool and its competencies. Self becomes part of a larger, conscious, spiritual whole that also serves the self. Is less self-sacrificial, though, than what you would see in the blue systems, or even in the green systems. The green system is sacrifice now for reward now. The blue system is sacrifice now for reward later. There is this global attention to the natural world where networking is valued, and it supports minimalist living where less is more. General life is supreme to individual life in this particular worldview. And I don't know if y'all know much about Neil deGrasse Tyson, but he did an excellent job, I felt, in representing that idea.
And occasionally in an accusatory way. Are you atheist? You know, the only ist I am is a scientist. All right? I don't associate with movements. I'm not an ism. I think for myself. The moment once someone attaches you to a philosophy or a movement, then they assign all the baggage and all the rest of the philosophy that goes with it to you. And when you want to have a conversation, they will assert that they already know everything important there is to know about you because of that association. And that's not the way to have a conversation. I'm sorry, it's not. I'd rather we explore each other's ideas in real time rather than assign a label to it and assert you know what's going to happen in advance. So what people are really after is, what is my stance on religion or spirituality or God? And I would say if I had to find a word that came closest, it would be agnostic. Agnostic, a word dates from the 19th century, Huxley. To refer to someone who doesn't know, but hasn't yet really seen evidence for it, but is prepared to embrace the evidence if it's there, but if it's not, it won't be forced to have to think something that is not otherwise supported. Okay? There are many atheists who say, well, all agnostics are atheists. Like, okay. I'm constantly claimed by atheists. I find this intriguing. In fact, on my wiki page, I didn't create the wiki page, others did, and I'm flattered that people cared enough about my life to assemble it. And it said, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an atheist. I said, well, that's not really true. I said, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an agnostic. Went back a week later, it said Neil Tyson is an atheist again, within a week. And I said, what's up with that? And I said, all right, now I have to word it a little differently. So I said, okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson, widely claimed by atheists, is actually an agnostic. And some will say, well, you're not being fair to the fact that they're actually the same thing. No, they're not the same thing, and I'll tell you why. Atheists I know who proudly wear the badge are active atheists. They're like in-your-face atheists, and they want to change policies, and they're having debates. I don't have the time, the interest, the energy to do any of that. I'm a scientist. I'm an educator. My goal is to get people thinking straight in the first place. Just get you to be curious about the natural world. That's what I'm about. I'm not about any of the rest of this. And it's odd that the word atheist even exists. I don't play golf. Is there a word for non-golf players? Do non-golf players gather and strategize? Do non-skiers have a word and come together and talk about the fact that they don't ski? I can't do that. I can't gather around and talk about how much everybody in the room doesn't believe in God. I just don't have the energy for that. And so agnostic separates me from the conduct of atheists, whether or not there's strong overlap between the two categories. And at the end of the day, I'd rather not be any category at all.
Could y'all see the difference between him and Oprah? Even though Oprah, I felt like Oprah was very adamant about personal agency, you know, and being responsible for yourself and choices you make. And that he talked more on the larger collective view of how people engage with each other and go about issues of identity and inclusion. So anywho, so these last two levels, the colors have been identified, but I've seen very little literature, so I have in my research started to do more in developing these higher levels. So I call this one the futurist level, and the color is coral. And so in this level, you see an attention to projecting and directing multiple futures. The material world is protected and not to be exploited. There is this desire to look for symbiosis between the material world and human beings. Attention to bioengineering for health and wealth generation, plus the integration of artificial intelligence into our daily lives. In this worldview, there is a belief in the realm of an inextricable existence between human beings and machines, that you see this meshing that's almost unidentifiable between the two. There is a recognizing of a metaphysical breach that acknowledges somatic being, our feelings, our emotions, as distinct from AI, but there is this goal to kind of integrate them.
Humans and machines have been merging for thousands of years. Right now I'm wearing shoes, I have a microphone on my jacket. We all probably used our phones at least once today, and we communicate with the augmentation of all sorts of amplification and even translation technologies. You can speak into a machine and it'll translate the words you're saying in nearly real time. So I think what might be different in the years to come is a matter of degree, not a matter of kind. One concept that I think is emerging is what I like to call the brain coprocessor, a device that intimately interacts with the brain. It can upload information to the brain and download information from it. Imagine that you could have a technology that could replace lost memories, or augment decision-making, or boost attention or cognition. To do that, though, we have to understand how the brain works at a very deep level. Although over 1/3 patients have had brain implants or neural implants that stimulate the nervous system, so far they've operated in an open loop fashion. That is, they drive activity in the brain, but not in a fully responsive fashion. What we want to do is have bidirectional communication to the brain. Can you read and write information continuously and supply, maybe through coupling these interfaces to silicon computers, exactly the information the brain needs? My hope is that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to get deep insights, thanks to our technologies, into how brain circuits compute. And that will drive the design of these interfaces so that we can deliver information to the brain and record information from the brain using the natural language of the brain, reading and writing information in a way that augments, for example, the number of things you can hold in your mind at once, or the ability to recall things nearly perfectly, which is, not an ability so different from looking something up on a search engine on your phone, right? So I think what's going to happen is a continuation of this trend. And I think a lot of people like to talk about artificial intelligence right now. Artificial intelligence, as it stands, is based on a lot of concepts that go back many decades, that build from some very simple observations about the brain. What might AI do, though, once we have incredibly deep insights into the nature of creativity and ethics and other things that the human brain seems to be uniquely equipped for? I think once we start to couple artificial intelligence to the brain that can really augment these uniquely human capabilities, it leads to a new era of what you might call hybrid intelligence. So it won't just be AI running the way in some positive feedback loop. It won't be humans upgrading themselves in the absence of coupling to the world, but I think it'll yield a new kind of symbiosis. And I think that's probably the best possible path. And it's also already, if you look at how people operate in the world, what seems to be one of the most prevalent models.
So essentially, he's talking about AI thinking and learning. So can you guys see now how tier 2 thinking is so different from tier 1? That if a person is preoccupied with how am I going to make rent next month, they're not free and open to think about some of these more loftier ideas. But if you're not saddled with subsistence living and you have the resources, it allows your mind to think in broader ways. And I think that that's what the framework is presenting. Any questions? Okay. I'm going to go to the last level that I felt comfortable identifying, and I call this the wisdom level. And so in this worldview, it gives attention to the extraterrestrial existence of life beyond the known terra firma. And this worldview would hold that there is something out in the universe that is besides what we know to be what exists on Earth. But if it is, in my opinion, God made that too. It holds that individuals form their realities in connection with an omniscient universal power element, not necessarily a personal God of religion. So these people you might hear talk about the universe, the energy, that's how they identify that aspect of external locus of control. There is an out there, but they don't necessarily see that out there source being organized religious God form. The spiritual meta-being merges with technology at this stage of viewing the world. Knowledge acquisition is free and open in order to promote the survival of all life. So again, you start to see this collectivist notion where information systems and new knowledge is not hoarded by someone to be profiteered and people to purchase and have access to it. In this worldview, the thinking is that all information needs to be open and shared, because in order for survival of life to take place, we need to have open systems, and people need access to information that will allow them to make quality analysis, worldviews, and problem solve. Emergent cycles of new information or reality are precipitated as expanded spiritual and universal exploration. Empathic knowing and ability is digitized. So you still see this element of the AI relationship, but instead of giving AI agency, like you saw on the previous level, this level holds that there's certain elements to AI that can never be replicated because of the uniqueness that human beings are. So in essence, oligarchy has no value in or purpose that is viable in this particular worldview. Oops, forgot to play that. So let me show you that representation.
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, rate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
I thought that was a great representation of what you had talked about. And you see still the inclusion of AI, but it privileges the uniquely human aspects of what we are, so it's more collectivist. So those are all the levels so far, and now what we're going to do is the critical analysis stuff. Did y'all enjoy that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I have to say this really weird, there's something about each one of those presentations that, like, freaks me out.
Yeah, they're unsettling. They are unsettling. So you have here some scenarios. So I usually like people to do this in groups. So if you two can work together and you two can work together, that'd be awesome. So you're going to read, there's a scenario 1 and scenario 2. And you have cultural and religious conflicts in education, and then the other one is cultural conflicts at work. And you're going to try to identify the spiral dynamic worldview among the actors. If you all, but anyway. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about memes. Did any of y'all see the new Black Panther movie? No? You gotta go see it. So even though it's very popular and people are very excited because you got these images that were representing Black people in roles that you typically don't see. So you have, first of all, this representation of romantic love that you don't see a lot as it relates to Black characters in media representation. And then you get also these powerful images of these Black women who are part of the Dora Milaje, and they were protecting the king. But I still find some problematic tropes that were associated with this as well, and some interesting topics. So here, this might not make sense if you haven't seen the movie, but here you have this tension that exists, a race-based trope that talks about, that highlights the fact that blacks are not a monolith. And so you have this tension between this diasporic African or American African, and then T'Challa, who was the African king. And it raises some tensions that I'm hearing a lot in my online groups about sometimes how continental Africans will embrace racist anti-blackness tropes about American black people. And so I thought that was a very interesting dynamic that's starting to be talked about, similar to the phenomenon of colorism that exists not only within black people groups, but also you see it in Indian groups, to the degree that skin color and this proximity to whiteness becomes an issue. But at the same time, I'm working on a study that looks at controlling images of black women in the media. And I guess what became problematic for me in this representation of the Dora Milaje is that you have this self-sacrificing trope that's been imposed upon black women. Black women are strong, black women protect their men, black women can't be vulnerable, feminine, and soft, and is sometimes tired and need of help. And so that particular trope just kind of raised an antenna for me. And so as a result of that, I wanted to mention my research. So I'm doing research that looks at what was entitled the pervasive nature of misogyny noir. And in French, the word noir means French, and we all know what misogyny means, right? This prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism against women. And so what I'm looking at is impact in social media spaces and popular culture. So I have this survey, and I would encourage you all to share it with your friends. The criteria for participation is that you have to have, you must be black male or female, self-identified, and to have lived the majority of your life here in the United States. Because I'm really looking to get a uniquely American experience of this phenomenon among black men and black women. So I thought I wasn't sure how much time I would have, because I wanted to talk about, let's see if I put it in here anyway. No, I didn't. Okay, maybe I can come back another time. But in terms of the future of this research, I'm really interested in epigenetics. Are y'all familiar with that? Okay, so epigenetics is this theory that our brains have genetic memory, and that issues such as trauma can be passed on biologically. And one instance in the literature they talked about that is that survivors of the Holocaust had transferred genetically the trauma of that experience. And so I'm thinking, I'm wondering if in fact these memes can be structural units that get passed on through our neurological systems, which would make them more than just a cultural unit, but actually has some biological components. So, as a scholar, you always have that stuff to look for in the future. But spiral dynamic theory is awesome, and I feel like it connects us to the evolving nature of cultural change. And here are my references. I want to click and leave those in case anybody wants to go back and reference some of this stuff as well. But yeah, so are there any more questions or comments or?
Why does this all feel so disturbing?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know.
I think because we're comfortable with predictability, and the idea about uncertainty unsettles us, particularly if you come from a very religious framework where, no, I don't know. You would have to articulate to me how.
I think because I can't place myself in any one of those.
Interesting. Well, I do have an instrument, and so at this time I'm using it to identify these constructs in this research I'm doing now, and I also used it in the research that I did in Chile. I think sometimes it's hard for us to see ourselves, and then probably you can't just instantly say, oh, this person is that, this person is that. To be responsible with this theory, it would take, that's why I do mixed methods. It would take a prolonged observation of how that person negotiates life in the world. So for this study, in addition to this survey, I also did one-on-one interviews. I did 6 of them. And I had a broad range of ages, from 19 till, I guess Gen X or maybe baby boom people. And they were an hour apiece, and I went through a series of questions. So yeah, usually I've gotten pretty good at it because I've been using it for a long time, and I can pretty much spot some of those trigger words. But I found it applicable. I have not found anybody who I did not find in that framework. So if we spent a lot of time together, I probably could help you appreciate it. It's probably green, though, from what I've seen so far. Yes?
So, can we move forward and then fall back?
Absolutely, that's a good question. That's why I'm so upset I didn't prepare to go further with this, because I am doing that. And I'm going to be presenting a faculty diversity fellow colloquium on May 2nd. And so I will try to make sure I include that. They're going to send it out to internally to the campus and also in the community to come to my colloquium. But yes, there is a change model for how people go forward. And in most instances, there is always a regression prior to moving to the next level. Because see, you come into this problem and you haven't developed the capacities to resolve them. You have to have enlightenment points. And so the first response to an existential crisis is to regress. And that's exactly how one responds. And then you realize, well, that doesn't work anymore. And so then you develop these enlightenment points. And then you have, in some instances, to consolidate the change, a removal of barriers that are disallowing you to move forward to the next level. And those can be, support systems that come into play. I use the example of my father and his use of blood pressure medicine. So spiral dynamically, I think it would be fair to call my father red blue, right? Very traditional black male or gentleman. And he, because my Native American background is my father, they are from Oklahoma, Creek Indian, and there's this resistance to really wanting to take medication. And so my father doesn't like to take the blood pressure medicine. So since I know he's red blue, I have to appeal to him in such a way that he will take the medicine. So I approached him from his role as a patriarch. And I said, well, Daddy, we need you. And if you don't take your medicine, you're not going to be around to help everybody. Plus, you like being independent. And if you have a stroke or something, you're going to lose mobility, you know that. And so either you could take the medicine or you could leave our family in a bad state by you getting ill and not being able. My father is almost 80 years old. He ain't really, the same person he was when I was 17. In any event, he still embraces that role. And that's a little bit purple too. And so what happens is I could appeal to him for that, and it has to be consolidated by my mother giving him his medicine every day at the same time. So then he starts to take this blood pressure medicine. But I have to meet him where he's at. And I think that's the beauty of being a tier 2 person that can kind of see down the spiral, or even just at a higher level. Because remember, the systems are assuming. So if you're at green, you've at some point gone through orange and blue, And so you can say, I know what's going on with them. Let me see if I can respond to them in this way. Okay? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.